Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So earlier today, I saw a couple of YouTube videos, one by China Fox and another one by Nelly B. And they were talking about Stephon Clark, and they were basically saying that he didn't respect black women, and therefore black women shouldn't be supporting him and, defending him and fighting for his rights and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read some excerpts from this particular article right here, showing the tweets so that you all can look at them for yourselves. And then I'm going to provide my commentary. So these are the tweets from Stephon Clark. And it's my understanding that these were in 2015. So this first tweet says, "I don't want nothing black but an Xbox. Dark bitches bring dark days." And then here's another one. "I don't want nothing black but an Xbox." And then he's saying the same thing. And then he has arrows pointed at black bitches. And then also he makes some comments about Black Lives Matter. And essentially he didn't really believe in it, according to this article, since his son was half Asian. He said, "I'm worried about my son. Hashtag Young Lives Matter." He said, "My son is Vietnamese and Indian. His life don't matter." And then there's some tweets from his baby's mother, who is Asian. And I'm going to show you their family photo before I go into her tweets. So this is his baby's mother and their two children. So this is what she said, according to this article. She said, "I'm saying Aiden's not even 2 weeks yet, and he's darker than me. I'm crying why my boy have to be so dark chocolate." Then she's like laughing out loud. And then there's another tweet where she says, "I'm praying the same thing. I just hope baby boy doesn't get as dark as his dad." So those are her comments. So here you have a man who's in a relationship with an Asian woman, a man who doesn't have much respect for black women, at least at the time when he put out this tweet, which was years ago. And so because of this, people are saying, well, black women shouldn't support this guy. They shouldn't fight for him. And, China Fox was saying that she's not, going to be rallying for this guy because of those tweets that he put out here. And I just want to provide my commentary real quick. I think this is another classic example of divide and conquer. Before I get into that, let me just say this. Obviously, I don't condone what he put out on Twitter. Obviously, that's something that's reprehensible and it deserves to be condemned. We should be celebrating black women, not trashing black women. And it seems to be popular in social media for black men to disrespect black women. You see it here on YouTube all the time. And it's a shame that the world has to witness this, has to witness black men trash their own women. So I understand that. I understand why the sisters have, anger and they can't respect this man because of those tweets. I get that. I understand that. But the thing that I want to point out is that this is nothing but another classic example of divide and conquer. Somebody went through this man's social media and said, let's look for dirt on this guy, something that will hurt him, something that will make it more difficult for people to empathize and sympathize with him, more difficult for people to see him as a human being. And we've seen this time and time again. So what they're doing right here is they are trying to divide the black community along gender lines. We know that here on YouTube and elsewhere, there's a gender war going on, and they're just trying to fuel that by putting out this information. These tweets that were put out years ago have no relevance whatsoever to the question of whether or not these police acted in a reasonable fashion. They have nothing to do with whether or not the police acted appropriately, whether they violated this brother's civil and human rights. It has nothing to do with that. Those tweets have nothing to do with that. It's just something to divert attention from the real issue, which is police brutality and racism in America. So they're going to have you talking about, these gender issues instead of dealing with the core issue, which is police brutality. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that there is a time and a place for a discussion about misogyny in the community, a time and a place to deal with these anti-black women views that exist in our community, unfortunately, amongst some in our community. There's a time and a place to address the issue of colorism and self-hatred. And obviously, those tweets reflect all of those things. And I think that we need to have that discussion. But we should not allow that discussion to derail us from the mission. We shouldn't allow that discussion to derail us from the fight against police brutality. So this is nothing but a divide and conquer tactic. I would not be surprised if law enforcement did not dig through all of this man's social media to find whatever dirt that they could find on him and then feed it to various media news sources. I wouldn't be surprised if that didn't occur here. If that did occur here, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that did occur here, that they actually dug up his stuff and then fed it to the media. And I think that this is probably just the beginning. They're going to come out with more trash on this brother to demonize him, to make him less than human so that people will not sympathize with him and so people will not care about his death. That's what I think they're going to do. And we know about this. We've seen this movie before. We saw it with Trayvon Martin. We saw how they tried to demonize Trayvon Martin and make him appear as a thug. They took pictures from his social media, like this picture here with him throwing up the birds. They took this picture here with the marijuana smoke. They took pictures of him with marijuana and guns and stuff like that, like this picture right here. And they used all of this imagery to dehumanize this brother, to demonize this brother, to make it easier for us to be okay with a verdict that allowed a killer, a real thug, to get away with murdering a black man. A black boy at that. He was only 17 or so when they killed him, when this pig right here killed him. But because they were able to desensitize people by painting Trayvon Martin as some kind of thug, this man, this monster, this real thug right here, George Zimmerman, got away with murder. Just like these cops will get away with murdering this brother, Stephon Clark, if this demonization and dehumanization Clark is allowed to continue. And we saw this with Michael Brown. We saw how they tried to demonize him, taking pictures from his social media, taking clips from that store to depict him as a thug, as a hooligan, as somebody that's violent, as a thief. And once they did that, it was easy for them not to bring charges. You know, the prosecutor had all these explanations as to why no charges would be filed against the officer who killed Michael Brown. And we also saw it with Freddie Gray. We saw how they tried to highlight his criminal record. Like right here, you had this article that shows all his arrests. And you had this photo with him near his criminal record history. They want you to focus on all these arrests and all that kind of stuff instead of focusing on what the real issue was, and that was whether or not the police lived up to the standards of care for police officers. The issue was whether or not these police officers committed manslaughter when this brother was killed, whether or not they violated policies and procedures in the police department. But instead of making that the issue, you had these right-wing media outlets focusing on this brother's criminal history, again, trying to demonize him and dehumanize him. And we see what happened in all these situations where they demonized the victim and they celebrated the perpetrators. We saw that in these three situations, the killers got off and there was no justice for the families. No justice at all. The only thing that happened for Freddie Gray was his family was able to recover millions of dollars in a settlement with the city. But in terms of justice, in terms of the police being held accountable, there was no justice. No justice at all, because they were able to demonize the victim. They were able to dehumanize the victim. And I see the same story playing out here with Stephon Clark. Again, we have to focus on the key issue, and that's ending police brutality, ending racial profiling. We should have the discussion about misogyny, but we cannot allow that to derail us from our fight against police brutality, against our fight against the modern day lynching of black men and women in this country. So tell me what you think. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace. And before I go, I want to emphasize one last point, and that's this. This case is really not about Stephon Clark as an individual. It's not about what he said on Twitter. It's not about him as an individual. It's about whether or not these police violated the law. That's what it's about. They want you to be talking about some years old tweets instead of talking about the fact that the police shot him 8 times from behind and on his side. That's what they don't want you to talk about. I will post a link in the description box to a video from CNN where they talk about the autopsy results, which contradict the police story about him allegedly advancing towards them. According to this autopsy, he was shot from behind and shot on his side. But they would rather have you talking about tweets. And unfortunately, that's what our people will focus on. Some damn tweets that are over a year old. These are close to 2 years old. Over 2 years old. People are talking about these tweets instead of talking about what's going on today. And that's that autopsy report revealing that this brother was hit 8 times. Hit from behind and on his side. They shot at this brother 20 times and he was unarmed.